There's something quietly sacred about early mornings. You rise before the world stirs. The house is silent. You reach for that one coffee mug, the one with the little crack near the handle, and settle into your favorite chair by the window, the one where the light always hits just right. Outside, the birds have already begun their songs, but inside it's just you and the stillness. You catch your reflection, not just in the mirror but in your thoughts. You pause, not to examine your face, but to ask something deeper. Am I still the same person I was yesterday? But what if the answer isn't about who you are, but who you've been for so long that you've stopped noticing the difference? What if the person brushing their teeth, walking the same path to the kitchen, scrolling the same headlines, reacting with the same emotions, isn't really you at all, but just a well-rehearsed script written by your past? Here's a quiet truth most people never confront. We're not really living, we're repeating. Not because we don't know better, but because habit shouts louder than intention. That might feel uncomfortable. You might be thinking, but my routines bring me comfort. They give my life structure. And yes, familiarity can be beautiful when it's chosen. But when the rhythm of our days plays on autopilot, we start mistaking memory for identity. And as beautiful as memory is, it can become a prison when we never step outside it. The Buddha once said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." But here's the twist. Most of today's thoughts are just echoes of yesterday. And then we wonder why everything feels the same. So let's pause, not to judge ourselves, but to simply notice. What if we stopped living from memory and started living from intention? This isn't about abandoning who you are. It's about peeling back the layers of habit to rediscover the awareness that's always been there. An inner self that is alive, conscious, and capable of change. In today's reflection, we'll explore this deeply. How your past silently shapes your personality. How unconscious patterns govern your emotions. And how, with mindfulness and gentle effort, you can stop being who you used to be and step into who you truly are. Even in the later chapters of life, it's never too late to remember. You are not your past. You are the awareness that chooses what comes next. Number 1, your mind is living in the past. There's a strange comfort in routines. You wake up, shuffle into the kitchen, sip coffee from that same old mug, look out the same window, and for a moment, the world feels stable, predictable. It all seems to make sense because you've done it 100 times before. But here's the hidden truth, that comfort can quietly turn into a loop that keeps you stuck, replaying old moments instead of creating new ones. Let me tell you a story. A humble villager once visited a monastery every morning. He'd sweep the garden and light incense before a statue of the Buddha. One day, a curious young monk asked, "Why do you sweep here every day, when the wind will just scatter leaves again?" The old man smiled softly and replied, "I'm not sweeping the leaves. I'm sweeping the dust from my own mind." You see, this man wasn't just following a routine. He was present in it. Each movement was intentional, done with awareness. But for most of us, our routines run on autopilot, and in that automation, we stop noticing the magic of life unfolding right in front of us. Modern neuroscience backs this up. Your brain is a record of your past. It wires itself around repeated emotions, thoughts, and experiences, until eventually, your reaction becomes your reality. But if your brain is living in the past, then who's living your present? What does that really mean? Every experience you've ever lived through, every emotion you've felt, every person you've loved or lost, every burst of joy and every moment of pain. They've all left fingerprints in your mind. These moments shape your brain like trails in a forest, neural pathways that deepen over time simply because they've been walked so often. And here's the thing, your brain begins to prefer those paths. It's easier to think the same thoughts you've always thought, to feel the same emotions you've always felt. Like a well-trodden path beneath your feet, your mind just follows the familiar route, without even realizing it. But here's where it gets confusing. You wake up, follow the same routine, think the same thoughts, feel the same emotions, and still hope for something different. Sound familiar? It's like planting tomato seeds and hoping roses will grow. In Buddhist wisdom, this cycle has a name, samsara, the endless loop of rebirth, not just the birth of new bodies, but the rebirth of the same reactions, the same habits, the same self, over and over again. The wheel turns because we keep holding on to who we were, to how we've always been. The Buddha said it clearly, what you dwell upon, you become. So what happens when we keep dwelling on yesterday? We slowly become a memory, a story on repeat, rather than a soul that's fully awake. Here's the heartbreaking part. Many people don't reach the end of their lives because they ran out of time. They reach it because they stopped being present within the time they had. Their days become echoes, not experiences. They confuse living longer with truly living. But now for the beautiful truth, you don't have to stay on that wheel. You're not stuck in your past. You're not sentenced to keep repeating the same inner dialogue. Your brain is adaptable. Your spirit is eternal. And every single breath you take is a chance to return, right here, right now. So where do we start? We begin small. We start with awareness, not with force, but with stillness. The next time you sit down with your morning coffee, don't just sip it. Feel the heat against your palms. Breathe in the scent. Hear the birds beyond the window. Notice that you're alive, right here, in this moment. It's simple, but it's also revolutionary. Because in that quiet act of noticing, you've already done something powerful. You've broken free from yesterday and finally arrived in today. Let me leave you with a reminder from the Dhammapada. The mind is everything. What you think, you become. If your mind lives in yesterday, then so does your life. But if your mind can return to this breath, this moment, this gentle smile, then, my dear friend, so can your life. Number 2, your thoughts and feelings, the invisible cycle that shapes us. It happens quietly. A thought slips into your mind like a shadow at sunset. Software unannounced, almost invisible. But somehow it stirs something in your chest. A heaviness, a quiet sadness, a reluctant sigh. Before you even notice it, that feeling starts feeding the thought that caused it. And now, what was once just a passing thought becomes a mood. That mood becomes the emotional tone of your entire day. And that tone, it quietly begins to shape who you believe you are. This subtle loop, thought, feeling, is what Buddhist psychology calls papancha, or mental proliferation. It's the mind's tendency to take one small spark and turn it into a wildfire of emotion and identity. Modern science now confirms this ancient truth. Each time you think a thought, your brain releases a chemical. That chemical creates a feeling in the body, and that feeling circles back to reinforce the original thought. It's a self-confirming loop. But here's the problem. We don't even realize it's happening. Let me share a story with you. An elderly woman once approached a monk, her heart weighed down with years of sadness. My family never visits me, she said quietly. I must not be lovable. The monk looked at her with kind, knowing eyes. And how long have you been repeating that thought? He asked. She paused. Years, she whispered. And how do you feel when you think it? Lonely, she replied. Small. And what do you do when you feel that way? The monk asked. I isolate, she said softly. I stay quiet. I don't reach out. The monk nodded gently. So your thought created your feeling created your silence, and your silence confirmed your thought. But none of it may actually be true. That's the silent trap so many of us fall into. Especially as we grow older, we carry wounds, old beliefs, past disappointments, and without realizing it, we keep thinking them, which means we keep feeling them, which means we keep living them. Not because those events are still happening, but because we never interrupted the cycle. The Buddha once said, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. But he didn't leave us there. He gave us a way out. Mindfulness. When we are truly present, we interrupt the cycle. We can watch our thoughts without believing every single one. We can notice our feelings without sinking into them. It's like standing by a river. Your thoughts and emotions are the water rushing by. But you are not the river. You're the one standing at the edge watching it flow. Here's something you can practice. The next time a painful thought arises, like, I'm too old to change, or no one really needs me anymore, don't fight it, don't judge it. Just pause and gently say to yourself, that's a thought. Take a breath, then ask, is this thought helping me open or close? Is it helping me expand or shrink, heal or hurt? You might be surprised how much space opens up inside you in that one simple act of noticing, because naming the thought sets you free. When you name a thought for what it is, you're no longer caught in it. You step outside the prison and become the observer, the witness, not the prisoner. And it's in this precise moment, right here, right now, that you reclaim your power. You interrupt the cycle one breath at a time. Let's return to the timeless wisdom of the Dhammapada. Let go of anger. Let go of pride. When you are bound by nothing, you go beyond sorrow. You are not your emotions. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them, and the one who sees is always free. Number 3, most of who you are is unconscious. There's a quiet sorrow many people carry but rarely speak aloud. The realization that we've lived large portions of our lives on autopilot, not because we didn't care, not because we lacked purpose or dreams, but because, somewhere along the road, habit became easier than curiosity. Repetition became safer than reinvention. Modern neuroscience reveals a startling truth. By the age of 35, about 95% of who we are, our thoughts, our emotional responses, our habits, has become memorized. Like a program running in the background, we operate from scripts so deeply rooted that they feel like us. But they're not. They're just patterns, written by childhood, by trauma, by culture, by fear. And over time, they've been repeated so often, we mistake them for our personality. But here's where the danger lies. When you forget the script is optional, it becomes your cage. In Buddhism, there's a word for this, sankhara, mental formations, unconscious tendencies, ingrained conditioning. The Buddha never said sankharas are evil. They're natural, but they must be seen clearly to be released. Otherwise, they become the invisible hand shaping your life, your reactions, your judgments, even how you see yourself. Let me share a story. There was a man named Raymond, a beloved schoolteacher for over 40 years. Every day he wore the same pressed shirt, drove the same route, and sat in the same pew at church. He was respected, admired, dependable. But in his 70s, after retirement, something began to unravel. With no structure to hold on to, he felt lost, like a ship adrift without a compass. "I don't know who I am without my routine," he confessed to a friend. "Without being useful, I feel invisible." His friend, once a monk, simply replied, "Perhaps now, you can finally begin to discover who you really are." Raymond's story isn't rare. In fact, it might feel familiar to you. Maybe you felt that same question rise in your quiet moments. If I'm not who I've always been, who am I now? That question can feel frightening, but it's also sacred, because it means your awareness is stirring, finally waking from years, maybe decades, of sleep. And when awareness returns, even late in life, it has the power to soften those rigid patterns and loosen the grip of unconscious habit. The Buddha described it beautifully. The fool sleeps as if he were already dead, but the master is awake and lives forever. So how do we begin this awakening? We start by turning inward, not with judgment, but with gentle observation. Watch yourself. Notice your tone when you speak. Notice the stories you tell yourself about aging, about regret, about your worth. You don't need to fix them right away. Just become aware, because awareness itself is the beginning of change. Notice the voice. Within, notice the words that rise when no one else is around, those quiet thoughts, those whispers in your mind. Where did they come from? Ask yourself, who taught me to think this way? Whose approval was I chasing when I first adopted this voice? And more importantly, am I still choosing this? Or is it just what I've always done? You see, you're not broken, you're simply rehearsed. And the beautiful thing about rehearsal, it can be paused, it can be rewritten. Even now, in the quiet space between two breaths, you can interrupt a thought that's lived inside you for 30 years. You can meet a lifelong habit with a gentle smile. You can take the steering wheel back from the ghost of your past. There's a teaching that says, the mind comes first. All things are led by the mind. They are made by the mind. If your mind has shaped who you've been, it can just as powerfully shape who you're becoming. You're not too old. You're not too late. You are never more than one breath away from being fully here, fully alive. Number 4, to change your life, you must change your state of being. It's easy to say, I want a new life. It's much harder to say, I'm willing to become a new version of myself. Especially when the self you've been for 60, 70, even 80 years feels so familiar, so solid, so final. But here's the quiet miracle. As long as you are breathing, your story is still being written. The question is, how does real change happen? Some think it takes struggle or dramatic transformation. But the truth is, deep, lasting change begins in the most sacred place, the state of your being. Now that phrase, state of being, might sound abstract, but it's really quite simple. Your state of being is the emotional and energetic tone you bring into this very moment. It's shaped by the thoughts you're thinking, the feelings you're holding, and the energy you're radiating, whether you're aware of it or not. Let's break it down gently. If you wake up carrying regret, if your heart beats with the pulse of disappointment, if your body tenses with fear about what tomorrow might bring, that becomes your state of being, and that state becomes the lens through which you see, feel, and respond to the world. It's not magic, it's not punishment, it's simply cause and effect. The Buddha explained it clearly. With our thoughts, we make the world. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows. Speak or act with a pure mind, and happiness follows you like a shadow that never leaves. This isn't just poetry, it's instruction. In today's words, we might say, life doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to who you're being. Let me share a story. A woman in her 60s once came to a meditation retreat. Her husband of 40 years had passed away. She carried grief, yes, but also a profound loss of identity. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "I don't know who I am without him." A teacher quietly placed a smooth stone in her hand and said, "Then let's find out who you are when you're simply present, with this stone, this breath, this moment." And in that still moment, shaky, raw, trembling, she began to rebuild, not by forcing a new life, but by simply coming home to the one that was already waiting for her, here, in the now. But a new state of being begins here. A new state of being isn't something you find in the past. It isn't built on titles, roles, or memories. It begins here, now. This is the hidden doorway available to all of us. You don't need to be younger. You don't need to be stronger. You don't even need to be confident. You only need to ask yourself one honest question. Who am I being right now? Am I being hopeful or guarded? Am I choosing love or holding on to resentment? Am I rooted in presence or lost in thought? Because whatever you are being, that is what you're broadcasting to the world. And the world quietly and consistently responds to that signal. But here's the grace of the Dharma. You can change your entire being with a single breath. Take one. Right now. Inhale deeply. Feel the air enter like a quiet gift. Exhale slowly. Let go of tension, of labels, of expectations. Notice what opens, that space, that stillness. That is the soil from which a new life can quietly begin to grow. A Buddhist monk once said, "Peace is not found by rearranging the world, but by realizing who you are beneath the chaos." So if you long for real change, not just improved conditions, but a gentler way of living, start not with your outer world, but with your inner one. Change your thoughts to be less punishing, more patient. Let your feelings become less recycled, more honest. Slow your breath. Make it sacred again. Breathe like your life depends on it, because it does. And over time, quietly, gradually, your state of being will shift. And when that shift happens, life responds, not with fanfare, but with grace. Because the truth is, you don't have to become someone new. You simply have to return to what's always been true within you. The peace you were born with, the stillness you forgot, the light that never left. Rebirth is not just metaphysical, it's mental. And so, morning arrives again. Software, unassuming, just as it always has. The sky turns from ash to gold. Light stretches slowly across the walls of your quiet room. You move, as you always have. The floor creaks beneath your feet. The mug touches the counter with a soft clink. A sigh escapes your lips like muscle memory. And before you even notice, you're by that same window again, looking out at the same trees. Then, as if by some ancient reflex, your eyes meet their own reflection in the mirror. But this time, something has shifted. Not outside, not in the mirror, not in the room around you. The change is subtler. It's internal. It's soft. It hums beneath the noise of the world. A quiet realization that something is different. Because today, when you look into your own eyes, you don't just say, "There I am." You ask, "Who am I becoming today?" And just like that, without effort, without force, you've stepped out of yesterday's memory and into today's possibility. The freedom to begin again. Through this journey, we've uncovered something quietly astonishing, something deeply human, that the past, with all its memories, routines, and emotions, doesn't simply trail behind us. Often it walks ahead of us, laying its footprints where we're about to step. Our thoughts, repeated over time, turn into feelings. Those feelings loop back and reinforce the very thoughts that created them. And slowly, subtly, we begin to confuse who we were with who we are now. We live out scripts we never consciously chose. Inherited beliefs, practiced reactions, and quiet fears that no longer belong to the present chapter, yet still shape the rhythm of our days. But right here, with breath in your lungs and presence in your heart, you hold one of the rarest freedoms, the freedom to choose your state of being. You can become aware of the loop. You can gently step out of it. You can interrupt an old thought with a wiser one. You can soften a feeling you've carried for decades with a single moment of compassion. You can stop living as a continuation of who you've been and begin living from the truth of who you really are. The Buddha once said, "Each morning we are born again." What we do today is what matters most. This isn't just poetry, it's profoundly practical. Because your rebirth isn't waiting in a distant temple or inside some grand spiritual awakening. It happens right here, in the kitchen, in the garden, in the quiet corners of your everyday life. It happens when you respond to frustration with patience instead of pain. When you take a walk, not to get somewhere, but to remember that you're alive in this body. It happens when you forgive yourself, not because you've done everything right, but because you finally understand. The version of you who made those choices doesn't need to be carried anymore. You are not your past. You are not your patterns. You are not your pain. You are awareness. And awareness always has the power to choose again. So as this reflection comes to a close, don't see it as an ending. Let it be a threshold, a quiet new beginning. Not a grand declaration, not a dramatic transformation, just a shift. A softer way of meeting yourself today. Don't just wake up and repeat the familiar. Let something in you stretch, like sunlight across your chest. Let something soften, like a burden that's finally ready to be set down. And ask yourself, even for a moment, what if I don't have to be who I was? Because you don't. You break the habit of being yourself not with force, but with one breath, one choice, one sacred act of stillness. And in that stillness, you may find that the truest kind of freedom isn't in becoming someone new, but in finally remembering who you really are. And so, remember this. The truth is, you never had to become anyone at all. You only had to return to the person you were before the world told you who you should be. If this reflection stirred something in your heart, if a quiet part of you felt seen or softened, consider subscribing to Quiet Wisdom. Together we walk gently through the later chapters of life, not to rewrite the story, but to read it again, with softer eyes, wiser hearts, and deeper peace. Thank you for sharing this moment. May it guide you back, home to yourself.